Welcome, everybody. We're here again today with Sarah Grebenick from Guaranteed Rate Affinity. And the last time, Sarah, we did a video talking about the mortgage lending process for buyers and stuff. And some stuff came up, in the Facebook chat, but also behind the scenes that led me to think that maybe we needed to do this and just to talk kind of more at a higher level for buyers. Just basically some definitions, explanations, roles, and so just to kind of clear some of that confusion up. So, so to get started, so when we talk about a lender, we're basically talking about the entity that's going to provide the money, the funds for the mortgage.
Yes.
Right? And that'll be the person you'll be paying every month, with for your mortgage.
So there is the lender and then there's a servicer as well. So you're actually going to pay the servicer your monthly payment, and the servicer can change, but typically the investor does not change.
Oh, okay. Okay. So is that's the thing that gets sold, like people, kind of swap and buy and it moves around? That's the
Correct.
servicer.
Is the servicer. Yep. So you might make your payment to like a Chase or, ABC Mortgage or another company, and you make your payment to them and they process it, but your loan is probably still invested in by, say Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac.
Got it. Okay. All right. That definitely is interesting. So, that's kind of behind the scenes. Usually it doesn't affect,
Correct. On the consumer side, you just know who you make your payment to, right? Like that's the most important thing. And there are all sorts of regulations. So you know who to make the payment to, how you can set it up, all that kind of good stuff. So it goes to the right place.
Okay. All right. Well, good. So just to share a little story. So when I was looking for a mortgage way back when, one of the mistakes I made, not understanding what we're about to talk about, I went directly to my bank and I, applied for a mortgage and went through the whole process with them. So what I didn't realize is I was limiting myself to the mortgage products that they offered, which, they offer X amount of mortgage products. And, there's different qualification terms and everything that they have for those things. So, what I didn't realize is that I was, number one, limiting myself just to that. And number two, there might have been better products for me or a better fit for me in my situation, in other places, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where a mortgage broker, kind of like the next step, a mortgage broker is somebody who you could go to, who could take all your information, and then they actually shop around for the different lenders that might fit with your circumstances. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. So like you were talking about, like a bank and financial institution, usually like the brick and mortar shops, right? Like somewhere you can walk into, they will have their own set of loan products that they're going to offer. Most of them are going to be backed still by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, so the two main investors, but they're going to be limited in some of those products that they offer, right? Or they may have more rules that they apply to their underwriting process than other places do. So that's one thing. You're just kind of limiting to like what that particular bank has chosen to offer for their mortgage product.
Okay.
And then if you go to somebody like a broker or a correspondent lender, then they have the ability to look at multiple different investors to find a product that might suit your situation better, like you said.
Okay. And so I want to distinguish the difference between a mortgage broker and yourself, which is a correspondence broker.
Right? Yes.
And the basic piece of it has to do with underwriting.
Yeah, it has to do with underwriting and kind of how we communicate with the investor. So a mortgage broker is kind of the mortgage broker is kind of the storefront, and then they're going to provide you with, or they communicate with underwriting from multiple different companies. So they take all of your information and then they basically send it out. They're kind of like a middleman. So they send it out to this other underwriter for this lender, for this investor, and say, okay, here's the information, underwrite it for that. And so they kind of have to choose right away, like which investor they want to go with, and then they just send that underwriting out typically.
And
So
underwriting, I'm sorry, just to
yeah.
not interrupt, but like underwriting is really that deep dive kind of research that they do, the lenders do to like see if you actually do qualify. I mean, there's the pre-qualification process and all that, but it's not guaranteed. And they do this deep dive, right? And sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah, it's true. So different investors will have guidelines to loans that they will underwrite and back. So again, Fannie and Freddie are kind of the best two examples, and they publish their stuff online, what their underwriting guidelines are. But an underwriter's job is to understand what those guidelines are. Usually they're pertaining to credit, income, assets, the property itself. Those are kind of the big boxes that they have to go through. And then they make sure that the borrower, the person applying for the loan, that they qualify in all of those different areas as determined by that investor.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And why it makes a difference is, if you are an employee where you're getting a paycheck from a company on a regular basis, that's one scenario. But then there's the self-employed people, the contractors, the artists, realtors, people like that have to kind of go through a different process, right? A different evaluation.
Yeah, sometimes they really need something that's kind of outside of that normal box, right? So, maybe a client has a massive amount of wealth. So maybe they have a really large investment portfolio, but they don't have any active employment. What does that person do? Where do they go to find a loan? Maybe it's a person that is really high wealth and maybe they're younger and they don't have a lot of credit because they've just paid for everything in cash. Or, so different scenarios like that, or someone who owns, a large amount of properties. Maybe they own a lot of rental properties. Sometimes there are limits on how many you can have of those. So it just kind of depends on, people have all sorts of scenarios. Everybody is different. And it could be like 4 of those all together.
Right. And so that's why I think a mortgage broker and someone like yourself,
correspondent lender,
it comes in handy because the traditional bank, lending product is going to be geared probably like more for the employee getting a regular paycheck. And so these unique or interesting situations would almost seem like no-brainers, like, oh, there's plenty of money in investments, or there's a trust fund, or there's alimony, or whatever it is, that seems to be, well, it should check all the boxes, but it doesn't. And so that's why you got to go through someone who can find the products that will, and the lenders that have the products that will fit your situation, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the point I wanted to make about the underwriting, which is different, is that, like you said, they find a mortgage broker finds, company A, company B, and they go with we're going to give company A, that's the best foot, I think. And company A goes through the underwriting process on their own, and say they come back and say, yeah, that's not really a good fit for us. Then he goes to company B. Well, they got to go through the underwriting process all over again.
Correct. Because it's a totally separate company.
Yeah. Okay. So now talk to me about, why does it keep
that difference?
Yeah. The difference.
Yeah, it gets really confusing, right? Because a broker has access to many different lenders. A correspondent lender has access to many different investors as well. So it's hard to know where their distinction is. And The best way to describe it is that the mortgage broker is really just the middleman. They don't actually typically employ any like processors and underwriters under their company's payroll. They have to send that out. Whereas a correspondent lender, we have our own underwriters that are, you know, authorized for such and such investors to be able to underwrite loans for them that we eventually sell to them. So it allows us to kind of keep in-house and keep things a little bit more agile. Like in the example that you were saying, if it doesn't work for one investor, we can switch investors, and it might be that same underwriter that can underwrite that file just to a different set of rules, a different set of guidelines. But it helps us be a little bit more agile at keeping the same file all in-house with our own underwriters.
Yeah. So really you're only, it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you just go through that underwriting process essentially once with one company. And then, and then you find the appropriate investor, as you're saying.
Yeah. And it's
And
really important for like me up front as a loan originator. That's a big part of my job, is understanding what your situation is as a buyer, and then looking at the resources and the investors that I have and determining which one might be the best fit for your particular situation. So that's really a big responsibility that I have as a loan originator, to make sure that I find the right one.
yeah. And, and what I love about that is, in those interesting circumstances where people just have, the different hybrid methods of income, you're not getting hit more than once for these credit checks and all that kind of thing, and having to supply all this information. You're just doing it one time,
Yep.
all that kind of thing. And then it feels like you're not wasting time.
Right. Yeah. You're not wasting time. You can go to one place and say, this is my situation. They can look at kind of the menu of what they might have available, and then be able to handle it that way.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
I love that. I think that is going to really help a lot of people with getting clarification around, who they should talk to,
Yeah.
personally, I would rather go with a company like Guaranteed Rate Affinity, because it's, not, it's easy, it's streamlined. We just go through this process one time, and then, and you guys find the perfect fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being part of this clarification with me. And we'll see what questions we get from this one. I love the conversation. I love, getting people educated. So it's great.
Yeah. And it's stuff you don't talk about every day. So,
I know.
it's fun to learn a little bit more about how mortgages work and what's available and what's out there. And so you're prepared when you're ready.
Exactly. I mean, I think people assume they know what's going on, and then you
Yeah.
start to get into the process, and you're like, oh my gosh, I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
There's so much more happening than you realize. So,
yeah. So thank you so much, Sarah. I
my
appreciate it,
pleasure.
and
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Sounds great.
Okay. Bye.